Welcome to the Psychology Is podcast. I am Nick Fortino, and I'm so grateful to be joined today by Dr. David Cohen. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much for asking me to be here with you today.
My pleasure. And I'll mention, I know we have many regular listeners of the podcast, and we always have new listeners as well. So I'll mention, especially to the regular listeners, that they're well aware that on this podcast, this here is, I believe, the 48th episode, and we have covered many different topics. But lately, and throughout the history of this podcast, we have turned our attention to the topic of modern day mental health care and the paradigms that support it, and specifically some of the problems with modern day practices in psychiatry. And we've had many very critical conversations, and you are someone that I decided to reach out to because I have come across your work and your positions on this issue. And I think that you are very insightful on the topic. And to be totally honest with you, sometimes I think that the people who become critics of modern day psychiatry sometimes get framed as fringe type of folks who are not necessarily associated with prestigious institutions or mainstream science in any way. And so to me, it's important that you are associated with UCLA, which is widely regarded as one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. And yet you also have, these positions that you have your criticisms of modern psychiatric practices that I think tend to counter the common narratives that people are exposed to. So for that reason, I think that makes you a somewhat unique guest. We've had other people who are also associated with mainstream prestigious institutions as well. But again, there's just no way that anyone could ever frame someone like you as being a sort of fringe conspiracy theorist.
Except the people who know me well.
Let me start by letting you explain to our audience, what is it that you do professionally?
Again, thank you for having me here. Really a pleasure to talk with you and your listeners. Professionally, my main activities are researching, teaching, and university administration at UCLA, at the Luskin School of Public Affairs. I mainly teach graduate social work students, people who are obtaining their MSWs or their master's degrees in public policy. Occasionally, we have some nurses that come in our classes, some psychologists, some physicians. So it's people mostly in the allied health sciences are the people I teach with too. My persistent interests, the things I've researched and written about for about 35 years now as an academician, have been medicalization, so the turning of problems into diseases that require medical interventions. They have to do with psychotropic drugs, first the prescription ones, first the antipsychotic ones, and then moving on to all the other different classes of them, the stimulants, the benzodiazepines, the antidepressants, the so-called mood stabilizers, and when looking at the drugs, looking at how they were seen, conceived, sort of viewed by different players in the mental health system, whether they're those who take them, those who prescribe them, those who sell them, those who write about them, those who are teachers, the professionals, the medical professionals, the non-medical professionals. So the whole representations of the drugs, how they're seen and used by different players, that's been a lot of my focus. And then I did much studying on the adverse effects of the drugs and generally the harms that result from mental health interventions. I've looked at drug safety systems. How do you ensure safety of products ranging from drugs to electroshock of the people that are going to be subjected to them? I've then looked at essentially law and ethics, the tight knot of law, ethics, and power when you're a mental patient, and what actually runs the show. Is it the values? Is it the laws? Is it the power you're under? What holds sway over everything? And how are these all tied together and difficult to unravel when you're in the center of them and tied up in knots by ethics or law or the power that people wield over you or that you wield over others? And so I've been into coercion, of course, dilemmas of coercions and systems of care, the history of coercion, how we force people to do things we want them to do. Usually we say for your own good, and things like that. So these are the interests and others, because there's no sense going through a list of all the things that I've looked at and try to really understand better. But it's around that. It's groups in the mental health system that are being subjected to different interventions, and the principles and the history of the things are being subjected to.
If only we could explore all of that expertise in one podcast episode, but we'll do our best here. And that kind of brings to mind why else I think you are a unique and very valuable guest, because you have a bird's eye view, it seems, of the whole situation. And I think it's quite difficult for people to get a bird's eye view, to have a historical context, to have context around all these different groups that you're talking about, to have context around the law, the ethics around everything. And then I've even heard you speak about the process by which drugs are approved and the connections between, lawmakers and drug companies and etc. So I aspire to kind of really see the big picture in the way that I think you're capable of seeing it, and I think you're going to help me see that big picture.
I would love to. This is, in fact, as my work has progressed and as time has passed and I've grown older, I feel that I'm looking. The portrait that I'm drawing, or that I see, is higher and higher level, in the sense that I'm a bit more distant from the objects and the activities on the ground, both in space and time. Meaning I'm very interested in how we were doing things 60,000 years ago. Is what I mean. We've been in groups for a long time. We've had to collaborate and cooperate. We've excluded and included. We've had rituals around that, I'm sure, for 100,000 years, if not more. We are only looking at ourselves over the last 50, 60 years. And so I'm conscious that a lot of things have gone on before. A lot of things will go on after. But I do try to get what I call the big picture.
Yes.
And it makes me pay attention to some patterns and completely ignore others that some of us might be caught up in. They're almost meaningless to me. But that might be illustrated as we continue discussing.
Right. Yeah, I'm curious about that comment, the patterns that you find yourself ignoring. And can you give an example of what you mean by that?
It doesn't really matter. For example, you said it doesn't quite matter the nature of the interventions, whether you're drugging someone or recommending them to take a drug or giving them a drug or putting it in their mouth or just talking with them. It doesn't quite matter sometimes the nature of the drug. It doesn't matter whether you're doing it in a mean way or a kind way, or you mean well, or you want to punish them, or ultimately, everything has an effect. And what people decide the effect is for them is often what it's going to be. There's a lot of constructionism in treatments. What is an effective treatment is not really something very objective when you're talking about influencing behavior. Even to some extent when you're talking about changing bodies and meeting targets to, say, reduce a cancer. That is something that's, you could say objectively measurable. I don't need to know your personality to know that the drug is having an effect, let's say. But for everything that has to do with me influencing how you feel and you think and you act, almost anything goes. The dynamics at work there are things that we just don't get. We just know that if you're seeking or willing and you get some palpable feeling in your body about something I've given you, there's going to be an effect. And you're going to decide what the effect's going to be to a great extent. So I mean to say that it doesn't quite matter sometimes the exact circumstances within which something is taking place. We're going to throw in meaning at it on all sides, and someone's going to come out of it with their own meaning, and it's going to have the effect they've wanted it to have, or the effect they have never wanted it to have. So what I'm saying is, it's hard to really understand exactly what's going on in healing relationships. We just know that they're malleable, they're powerful, and they're like a constant. What exactly the different forms they take are almost irrelevant. There's like this constant invariant connection, and good luck to understand how it works. But something happens, and it gets used by charlatans, by experts, by well-meaning people, by people themselves over and over again in the past, and will get used in the future.
Interesting. Well, I would love for you to perhaps articulate what you see is the modern day mental health care system, particularly as provided by professional psychiatrists. If you could articulate how you see that system as functioning and what maybe some of the core beliefs are that underlie it. If you could articulate that and then express to me, what do you believe are some of the core problems with modern day mental health care?
Okay. Well, that's a good, I guess, way to start. The core beliefs, the core problems with those beliefs. Let me just start by something that came on my desk. It's an article. It's a big review article in the journal Neuron. Neuron is a Nature publication. It's maybe one of the most prestigious biological neurobiology publications in the world. And I think it came out August 17th. I wrote down a couple of lines from it. So it's a review by Raymond Dolan. He is considered one of the, most cited, top second or third or fourth most cited neuroscientists in the world. And he and his colleagues wrote a review of a massive amount of brain imaging, neuroimaging literature. He says they looked at 16,000 articles that were published in the last 30 years. It's a huge body of knowledge looking for the underlying neurobiological basis of psychiatric conditions. So I would love to read to you the conclusion, a couple of passages. I think it's going to tell us what are the core beliefs and what are the core problems. He writes, despite 3 decades of intense neuroimaging research, we still lack a neurobiological account for any psychiatric condition. He continues, thus, it remains difficult to refute a critique that psychiatry's most fundamental characteristic is its ignorance, that it cannot successfully define the object of its attention, while its attempts to lay bare the etiology of its disorders have been a litany of failures, unquote. So that's not me saying that. I agree with that 100%. That's Raymond Dolan in Neuron. A couple of weeks before, we had the review by Joanna Moncrief and her colleagues. I believe Joanna has been on your show, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct, yes.
She published her review, a systematic review of the 6 or 7 different lines of research pertaining to the association between the neurotransmitter serotonin and the condition that's called major depressive disorder. And she concludes that there is no